So what happens when someone who doesn't believe in ghosts actually runs into one? My guest, Don Allison, was a journalist when he ran into a ghost on a haunted battlefield. Join me in 5 minutes to hear his story. Grab your popcorn and snacks. Find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust. Turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to begin. Good evening, everybody. How was everybody's long weekend? I hope it was good. Mine was. I just got home about maybe 2 or 3 hours ago from seeing Top Gun Maverick. Great show. Great movie. And he puts in a lot of what they call Easter eggs in there too. Dedications to the fighter pilots, and not only the Navy fighter pilots, but the Air Force fighter guys too in there. I'm not going to give it away, but anybody that's an airplane buff and follows military aircraft, you'll see it right away. The first couple scenes of the movie, you'll notice it right away. I know I did. But it's a good movie. Go see it. It's all good. I don't want to start doing movie reviews. Not my gig. Anyway, what is my gig is being here with you guys in the evenings. 6:30 to 7:30 every day. 6 days a week, right? Yeah, 6 days a week now. My name is Charlotte. I'm going to be your host for the next hour. I'm also the owner of the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation team based out of Sacramento, California. We are 45 strong up and down the state of California. And what that means is that if you have a paranormal issue that you need help with, give us a ring, shoot me an email, do a PM on Facebook, because we can get to you. And if we don't live near your county, we'll get people into your county. That's how we work. We also have people, get this, in Oregon, Washington, Nevada, and Hawaii. So we are everywhere. And we don't charge for our services. We're here to educate people about the paranormal. We're not going out to look for ghosts, even though that's what we do. We go out first and we look at, I'm a journalist, right? I have people on my staff who are nurses, and I have people on my staff that are former police officers. So when we go out, we're looking for that logical explanation. Like Nancy said last Friday, I have to have that logical thing going on. That's what I do. And then if we can't find any logical answers for what's going on with you, then we start looking at the paranormal part. Yeah. Now, that's leading me into tonight's guest. Okay? If you're watching this show from YouTube, please subscribe. You can have updates on all the shows we're doing. It's that little ghost down at the bottom right-hand corner. Just click on that. But this leads me into my guest tonight, Mr. Don Allison. Mr. Don Allison is also a journalist, just like me. And like Nancy said Friday, journalists, we have to have it right in front of us, just the facts, man. We're almost like police officers in a lot of ways, because we have to be able to put the story together just like anybody else. And we look at all sides. That's the other thing, too, is we look at all sides of the story. We have to stay neutral. That's our job. But when a journalist runs into something they can't explain, it's mind-blowing, just like it is for anybody else. And Mr. Allison had an experience. And I'm going to let him tell you about it, because he'll probably tell you better. Do a better job of it. But he had an experience. And after that experience, of course, he had more experiences, because that's usually how these things work. But I'm really excited to have him on. I think you're going to be really interested in his story, because I've always said that everybody's born with psychic abilities. We just kind of hide them as we get older, because other things happen. Life happens. And all it takes is one trigger, one event to trigger that, which is why you will probably, you might not see a ghost, but at some point you'll see one, if it does happen to you. And then after that, you see more, because because that event has opened that hidden door, that was hidden for so long. But anyway, I want to let him tell his story to you guys, because I think it's better if he does it. Okay, let me bring him in. Move my button. There we go. Hello, sir.
Hello.
How are you today?
Doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing really good. I'm really interested in your story. I mean, we have similar careers, yet different, But we're both trained journalists, so I'm really interested in your experiences.
Yeah, it's paranormal is not something that I went looking for. It really came looking for me.
So tell me, let's tell everybody about your background, and then we'll go into that. How all that transpired.
Well, I am retired now, though I still write a weekly column that doubles as my blog. But I was editor of a daily newspaper in Northwest Ohio for many years. I've worked in the field of journalism since the late 1970s. And now I publish history and paranormal books, author and publisher, do some true crime books through our publishing company, but yeah, and paranormal investigating is part of what I do.
And what? Okay, now we can segue into all this. What got you into paranormal investigating?
The investigating part, well, really the paranormal, what got me interested is our house.
Mm-hmm.
The house that I'm living in now, that I'm talking to you from now. It's an 1835 house, Northwest Ohio, and it was in very poor shape. We had to work on it for years before we moved in, and we started having things we could not explain. You would hear footsteps when no one is there. You would hear doors open and close, hear steps going on. We would have odd electrical things happen, and it just, at first I thought I was losing my mind, but as we got into it, started looking into what's going on, doing some research into these things, it turns out, yes, these are very real occurrences.
When it first started happening, I know I grew up in a haunted house, and I'm not quite as old as yours that you're living in, but I remember people, when I first started coming to them, I was a kid, and of course the first thing they think is, oh, it's your imagination, it's all this going on, but the stuff kept happening and happening. And finally, when my father became elderly, he started seeing stuff. And he went, oh my God, I saw that. Did you see that? So what was it like, as a journalist, because like you deal with facts, I deal with facts, having to wrap your head around all that?
It was difficult to say the least. I started talking about what was going on with my coworkers at the newspaper, and they were fascinated by it. I guess it made me feel good. They know me, and they know, hey, if I am experiencing these things, there's something to it. Yeah, I wouldn't be making this up or hallucinating, although I question my own sanity a little more than maybe they question my sanity. But yeah, they encouraged me to talk about it, to look into it, and eventually to write about it.
What kind of things were happening?
The most common was footsteps, very clear footsteps. A good way to describe the one set of steps is it sounded like a heavy set man with leather soled boots. And some of it, I believe, is residual. You would sometimes hear the front door open, hear the steps go down the hall or up the stairs, and I would investigate. No one was there. You heard the door open, but yet and not close. But yet you'd look, the door was still closed. But then other times they would react to you. You would speak out, they would stop, or they would keep ahead of you if you would go after them. Another set sounded like a barefoot child. Those would always occur upstairs. And I would go investigate. Nothing's there. The one room had a water damaged floor, and even a child would have fallen through spots of the rotted floor. But nobody fell through. The very heavy dust and no footprints. But yet they were there.
And can I ask you, where's that? Is this a house in Ohio?
Yes, it is. Northwest Ohio.
Okay. And what did you find out about the history of the house?
Lots of interesting history. It was built by a War of 1812 veteran. He actually was one of the first circuit court judges in this area. And apparently wealthy. He would found a town, plat it out, sell the lots, move on, and do this again. And he actually established a town just south of where the house is. He had built a log cabin initially, served as a store, a church, And then he had this brick house built, and it was his final home. He had a mill built on the creek back of the house. Very interesting fellow.
So I guess he liked it so much he didn't want to leave.
Yeah, that seems to be the case. Although I don't know if he is one of the spirits, because he died in 1846.
Okay.
So his kids had the house. It was an Underground Railroad house.
Oh boy.
I don't know if when he had it, but I know his daughter and son-in-law were kind of the movers and shakers of the Underground Railroad, and they had the house for a time.
There's a lot of stories about houses in the South like that, that had been with the Underground Railroad and a lot of activity in them.
Yeah, and the people who are the owners after the Perkins family, Judge John Perkins was the judge who had the house. Henry and Margaret Miller, they had 4 sons serve in the Union Army during the Civil War. The sons grew up here from 1850 on. 2 of the sons did not make it home.
Okay.
And Henry and Margaret both died in 1863 in September, just about 3 weeks apart, probably due to a fever of some sort of disease. It was very common, malaria type diseases. This was the old Great Black Swamp.
It sounds like they were pretty benign, though. I mean, did they start moving objects around or anything like that?
Yeah, they do move objects, and part of it is electrical things. And we didn't have electricity turned on at the house. There was a lot of water damage, so we just used generators and so forth. But radio stations, the radio would come on and turn off by itself, battery powered or plugged into a generator. The stations would change on their own, which could be irritating sometimes. I would be listening to one thing, the radio station would change. I'm a Detroit Tigers fan, and one of the favorite things would be to get a Cleveland Indians game on the radio.
Well, you live in Ohio. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it does. We live near the Michigan border, so the Detroit Tiger part comes into play too.
Well, that's kind of interesting, though, when you think about the possible dates of the ghosts that could be living in there. I don't think the Indians were around the Detroit Tigers back then.
No, we have a medium friend who has never been here. We've talked to her on the phone, and she has pointed out Henry and Margaret Miller are two of the spirits that she have come through to her. Another one, we don't know the name, but she believes he's from the 1960s.
That would make sense then. There, yeah.
And we don't know who he might be. Once on an Ovilus, I did get the name Nathan.
Okay.
And but we do live on a U.S. highway. There have been some accidents through the years in this area, so maybe that's an explanation. Really don't know. I'd like to know more about who this is, but yeah, he does not like rock music. Once I was cutting floorboards and listening to a classic rock station, and every time a rather kind of upbeat, maybe louder song came on, the radio would turn off. And after the third time, this was one of the first times I ever spoke out loud. I said, leave the radio alone. I like the music. Just don't mess with my radio. I heard a few songs, and then the song Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting by Elton John came on. The radio did not turn off. The generator outside turned off. I stood in the dark and just laughed. What do you do?
Funny. That's funny. Well, that would explain the thing with the baseball, though, because it's about the right time period.
Yeah, and another
time, if he doesn't like rock, you can kind of think about that too, and kind of you might be able to kind of gauge his age a little bit too. He might have been from like the 30s or something, somewhere along in there.
Yeah, it could be my medium friend. Just pegged him as he does not like rock, and he's a country
Uh,
music.
okay.
And he also likes. I went to the University of Toledo. Our arch rivals, Bowling Green State
Mm-hmm.
University. Once my wife and I were working outside, had the radio going. The radio kept turning to a Bowling Green State University men's basketball game. No matter what station we put it on, it within 30 seconds went back to the basketball game. We gave up, left it on the basketball game. Once the basketball game was over, we could listen to any station we wanted.
That's funny. That's funny. So do you have agreements with them at all? I mean, do you talk to them and say, look, like in my house, my agreement is I know you're here, I know you're here, just don't scare me. That's my agreement with the ones I have.
I have asked that they not destroy things. We have had on occasion things get thrown
Mm-hmm.
once, and it's really odd. I installed a sliding door. My
Mm-hmm.
office that I'm in now was a bedroom originally, a rather small bedroom, and the door had been removed. We figured out to become the front door of an 1869 edition, but maybe that's neither here nor there. But I got an 1870s pocket door that I installed to save space. And when I went to install the track for the sliding door, all
Mm-hmm.
the batteries in my drills, I had 3 drills with extra batteries. The batteries went dead immediately, something that happens on occasion. So I felt like, gee, they don't want this door installed.
Mm-hmm.
So I used a plug-in drill, got it installed. The first day after the door was installed, I worked in my office all morning, went to the other part of the house to have lunch. When I came back, the door was closed. Now, this door, it took my wife and I both to lift it to get it into place.
Mm-hmm.
The second day, the same thing happened. I knew for sure I had not closed it the second time. Third day, the same thing. This time, when I opened it, came in and sat down, a can of compressed air over by my computer. I was sat down at the desk. The compressed air flew across the room, fell down, and broke. When I retrieved that, um, a couple of books on my bookshelf were thrown, and took out a commemorative mug and broke that. So I
Wow.
spoke out loud and said, look, you can be here, that's fine, but don't be breaking my stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And once since then, they threw a clock off of my desk here. And again, I said, look, no, don't be destroying things. That's the last time that happened. That was probably 8 or 10 months ago.
Well, that's good though. I mean, it's not bad really if they're decent ghosts, if we want to put it that way.
Yeah.
It's not hard to live with them in your house.
No, it isn't. And these are, for the most part, very, very benign.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, what about at night? Like when you guys go to bed at night, you still hear the footsteps and the noises and stuff?
Yeah, we hear around the bedroom and sometimes in the hallway the barefoot footsteps I mentioned earlier. We believe we know who she is. She's a little girl. She died, unfortunately, of bone cancer
Aw.
in the early 1880s, and she was only about maybe 7 or 8 years old. This was not her house, but it was her grandparents' house. And we believe that's who it is. But you will hear her kind of walk around the outside of the room or out in the hallway. But my wife has a necklace stand on a dresser, and you will see like she's playing with the necklaces. You'll actually see them move, and you can hear them. And she will play with the door of the wardrobe in the room. You'll hear it move.
Now, I just think it's nice because you pretty much know who it is. I think it's spooky when you don't know who it is.
But I was at actually a conference, and a medium was talking to somebody else. I walked by, did not know her from Adam. She didn't know who I was, but she stopped talking to the person with her, looked at me and said, "You have a little girl." And I said, "Excuse me," out of the blue. And she said, "Oh, I'm sorry, you have a little girl with you." And she proceeded to describe what, and I should backtrack because we were having a clothes washer installed, and a guy, one of the men there, kind of freaked out, and he started going, "Excuse me, I was talking to his coworker. He's at the foot of the stairs with the new clothes washer." He says, "Can I ask you a question?" I said, "Why, did you hear something?" I said, "Things happen here, and often, like, people working will stir it up." He says, "No." He said, "I saw something, and I'm majorly creeping out right now." And he proceeded to describe a little girl. And he said he knew something was wrong because she was in very old-fashioned clothes, like a knee-length dress, sounded like a play dress or night dress from the 1800s. But she looked out from our bedroom, the middle bedroom, at him, stepped out to the top of the stairs and looked him in the eye. And he said that he knew something wasn't right because the clothes were out of style. And he said she had brown curly hair, and he said the dress was dirty. And then she turned to walk back into the room, and it freaked him out. I didn't know if he was going to defecate or run away or both. But I said, "Don't run. We wanted the new clothes washer. We needed it." So, but the medium then that I encountered later proceeded to describe this very same spirit in even more detail, and that rather got my attention, to say the least.
Oh, it would be too. Maybe maybe she hangs out there too because if it was her grandparents' house, that was a happy place for her to be.
That's our theory, and and I asked the medium, "Well, why does she why would she be here?" And the medium said, "She likes you." And then she said, "She's always in the background. You'll hear her, be aware of her, but she doesn't come up close." And that's very true. She'll walk around the perimeter of the room or the hallway outside the door, but she doesn't approach us.
Have you found? Has it been the same ones all along, or do you think you're attracting more?
Um, I do not investigate the house. I used an ovulus once because our bird was playing peekaboo. We have a parrot, and he was playing peekaboo with something in the dining room. We're in the adjoining living room, and
That would
he's
do it.
looking in, and he's talking and bobbing his head. So I took the bird in the room, and he's focused in the corner. So I walked over to the corner, and it was very cold. I mean, it felt like about 20 degrees colder than the rest of the room. So I did get an ovulus out and asked, "Is there someone here?" Got some answers. He asked, "Well, what's your name?" "Nathan."
Wow, wow. Well, I can understand that. I've got a cockatiel, and it's either when I get up in the morning, it's saying words I didn't teach it, or I'll maybe fall asleep out on the couch, and at 2, 3 in the morning, it's talking to somebody, and so I can tell somebody's standing in their cage because the bird's responding.
Mhm.
So yeah, I go through that too. It's just
Yeah, and
fascinating to hear somebody else talk about it.
it is. I've one person I know said, "Gee, maybe you should get EVP by parrot because our bird does talk." So,
That's funny. That's funny.
but
Now,
once
go ahead.
one time, about 3 days in a row, I heard what sounded like a woman coughing in the living room down the hall from my office. And it happened about 3 in the afternoon. But that's really strange because I was home alone. I went down and investigated. But the third day that it happened, the bird started imitating a cough, and he will
Oh,
do that to my wife and I. I thought, okay, so I'm not hearing things. The bird heard it too.
that's crazy. I mean, not crazy. I mean, to somebody listening from the outside of this, to me, it's like normal stuff because I go through
Yeah.
it all the time. Or the dog will focus. Like right now, I have a 2-year-old dog that I just got, and I don't know what it is that's over in the like left-hand upper corner of my living room, but she gets up on the back of the couch and stands there and stares at it. So I have no clue what it is. So it's like, can you not do that when I'm in the room? I don't want to know,
Yeah, animals do have that sense, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So when your journalism mind was trying to make sense out of it, because I know I did that too. You're trying to find the logical answers. What did your mind tell you at first was going on?
I knew that it was something, but I tried to push it away, like, no, it can't be. But other people would be working and helping me out. They would hear the things, experience it. Sometimes we would smell tobacco smoke, like a sweet pipe tobacco, and other people would smell it. I have a friend who's very skeptical, and he was like, nah, no, this can't be. But he and his wife were visiting, and he smelled the pipe tobacco smoke.
Hmm.
And that kind of won him over to it. So it's interesting because we were talking about the little girl ghost,
Mm-hmm.
and that she had been seen. And my friend, he's a fellow historian, he decided to research who it might be, and he came up with the same little girl that we did, not knowing who we thought it was. And what's really weird is his was actually his like great aunt. It's a relative of his.
Wow. Talk about coincidences. So then you go to the battlefield, right? Or did this happen before all this?
This was
Okay.
during this. Yeah, well, before I'm trying to think. Yeah, we had moved into the house by this point, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it was still ongoing.
So what? Why did you go to the battlefield? Was it just a historical curiosity you had, or were you working on a story,
Well,
or how did that
yeah,
begin?
I've been a Civil War historian researcher on the side for many years. Written books on the subject and
Mm-hmm.
so forth. But my grandson and I would go to historical sites over spring break.
Mm-hmm.
And the one spring we chose Gettysburg. He was 14 at the time. And so we went for the history, not for the hauntings. But I registered as a journalist, and one of the things that I was offered through their tourism marketing group was a free ghost investigation. And so I said, Connor, do you want to do this? He said, yeah, Grandpa, that sounds cool. So I thought this was just a touristy hoax thing,
Mm-hmm.
but it turned out it was not. We had some very real experiences that just left me like trying to decide if this was real or I was being somehow hoaxed or what was up.
Well, to lead up to this, had you seen any apparitions at your house at all?
I had not at that time seen anything beyond my wife and I saw a shadow figure.
Mm-hmm.
And once, shortly after we moved in, I heard footsteps come down the hall. My wife had just left to run into town. And I heard the steps. I got up, looked out in the hallway. No one was there. I sat back down. The steps resumed, came in behind me where I'm sitting now. There's a lamp behind me. The steps passed behind me, cast a shadow on the wall. It looked like a large man's silhouette. I felt very cold as the steps passed behind me and went into the to the library. Then the next room over.
Okay. So what exactly did you see at the battlefield that first trip?
Well, at the battlefield, we didn't see anything. We had a ghost box.
Mm-hmm.
The young lady who led us on this investigation saw a shadow figure, and the way she reacted, I believe she did. My grandson also saw a shadow figure, and it obviously, got his attention.
Mm-hmm.
But we went to Sachs Bridge, a covered bridge that was crossed by both sides, and that entire area was a field hospital. And it was crowded when we first got there. We were getting nothing. It was to be a 2-hour investigation. And other than the shadow figures, I was underwhelmed, is maybe a good way to put it. But just before we were to leave, we had the bridge to ourselves. we started getting hits with a ghost box, spirit box. Is anyone with us? Yes. How many of you are with us? 7, 8, 9. Well, this is interesting. And a number of answers, but then it started, we weren't getting anything. So we were getting ready to leave. The young lady leading the investigation went back to her car to warm it up. It was a rather cool, I guess it was late March evening. And while she was gone, I thought, okay, if there's anything to this, I said, do you like jokes? And I got a clear yes. Yeah, that's interesting. I'll say, is this really a soldier? We had gotten the year 1863, by the way, when she had asked what year it was. But I said, do you like music? And it was like I had insulted the spirit. He said, of course. And my grandson, he's 14 years old, and he was used to things happening in our house. So he said, can you play for us? And I didn't think to ask that. And the spirit says, yes, we started getting guitar music through the acoustic guitar. And I know this was not like anything going on like from the car, because the lady turned the car off, and I had never heard music coming from the car. It was not a car radio. She came back, this music's going on, and her eyes just got wide and her jaw dropped, staring at the spirit box with this music. And then higher pitched, I thought it sounded like a mandolin, but she thought it was a piano came in. This music we couldn't recognize the tune, but it sounded Civil War period music, fading in and out. And after a while, it quit. And I said, wow, you're good. The voice says, thank you. I said, can you play some more? And yes. So it started coming up, and this time harmonica kicked in. And I'm thinking, okay, this has got to be a hoax. They're trying to pull one over to get a good write-up from this journalist visiting. But no, the music finally faded out. We started getting answers to questions, and we got a name. The young lady says, can you give us your name? It was 3 syllables. We couldn't quite make it out. It was like on, and then a hard like GS at the end. And this kept repeating. And she said, can you enunciate more clearly? It's like this entity wanted us to know the name. But finally, we couldn't get it. But we got different things. How old are you? 20. Were you a soldier? Yes. What state were you from? We couldn't quite make it out. So I started naming states. And when I said Ohio, I said, yes, Ohio. And my grandson and I each had a K2 meter, and we had gotten like nothing on these things all night. Both of our I said, yeah, we're from Ohio. My grandson's from Ohio. The K2 meters went clear to the highest level. The needle stayed there for a while. But yeah, the investigator right beside us, hers did not move. Rather odd. And then he said, Captain, that was unsolicited. And got some other things, and then finally it started to fade out. But then the investigator asked, were you hurt? And we got, and this still gets to me to this day, this blood-curdling male scream of like total anguish, and then a woman crying, and just like, wow. At this point, some people came in the other end of the bridge, and we wrapped it up. And I'm thinking, okay, did they somehow pull a hoax on this? I peppered this young lady with all kinds of questions. And she seemed very sincere. She said she had never heard music. She said this was like a 9.5 on a scale. It's a 10 from investigations. She was pretty impressed by it. So when I got home, I was going to prove how we had been hoaxed. So I looked into how ghost boxes work, and now they, excuse me, the pollen's getting to me a little bit here.
That's okay.
Get a drink. So I looked into how ghost boxes work. No, you can't broadcast to them. They're just scanning radio stations using the white noise. But I thought, okay, were there any captains more from Ohio mortally wounded or killed at Gettysburg? So I did the research. Yes, there were 7. One of them, the name Malon Briggs, 3 syllables on RGS at the end. Malon Briggs was wounded and captured on the first day's fight. And the Sachs Bridge area, some of the worst wounded Union prisoners were brought there and left there. Well, he died during the second day, possibly at Sachs Bridge. So that one that impressed me. I even found his photograph in my research, and actually his picture is on the cover of the book that came out of this. I Met a Ghost at Gettysburg.
That's absolutely fascinating, and that would be. I mean, if I was on the investigation, that would be a lot of evidence. A lot. That's pretty awesome. So you wrote a book about this, right?
Correct. And it explores really. It's the subtitle. Well, the title is "I Met a Ghost at Gettysburg." A journalist's journey into the paranormal is the subtitle. I didn't want to write this book. My wife had a lot to do with this, twisted my arm. My coworkers at the newspaper said, you need to write about this. So I did. I thought it would be one book and done, but it opened a lot of new doors for me.
Did you go back to Gettysburg?
Many, many, many times. Actually, my wife and I honeymooned there a long time ago. But
So when you went back, did you do any investigating at all?
Yeah, I now go there several times a year and do a lot of paranormal investigating. My favorite place is the Confederate Field Hospital. It was the old Sanders Farm, and actually some friends of my wife and I from the Detroit area purchased that property, and they now actually have people come in to do paranormal investigations as part of how they make their living. The place is incredibly active.
So, who else has spoken to you? On the battleground.
On the battleground, one of the unfortunate things is the National Park Service will not allow ghost hunting equipment, investigative equipment on the field. They will actually confiscate the equipment and cite you. Wow. They use the rationale that an electromagnetic field meter can be used to find metal relics in the ground. Of course, that is illegal. That's the rationale they use. But I have seen entities on the battlefield, which was mind-blowing. But I've done a lot of investigating outside of the battlefield where you can investigate, like the Sanders farm. I actually have a ghost that, if I'm in the basement of their facility, will talk to me with the ghost box. He'll ask for me when I'm not there. And we believe he is a young black boy who was probably a camp servant to one of the Confederate officers that was wounded there. Who knows? He may have been wounded or gotten sick and died there. We don't know. But his name's Jackson.
Okay. When you talk about seeing entities, what types of entities have you seen there?
The most incredible experience I had was a little over 2 years ago. I was there with a medium friend, and I just wanted to get her impressions of that. It's actually at Little Round Top, and I had family who fought there. And we were at the Alabama Monument, and we were talking. It was just getting to be dusk, and I saw 4 semi-transparent Confederate soldiers walking up toward us from behind her. And I had never seen anything like it. I was dumbfounded.
Hmm.
She spun around and said, "Don't sneak up on me like that." I saw four of them. She said a fifth one continued on that I did not see. But they actually backed up when she said that and stood there looking at us. So these were intelligent. They were reacting to us. I could tell they were Confederate soldiers. These had guns. One had a blanket roll. I could see the cut of their uniform, their short cut jackets. They had slouch, hats with brims, and they were reacting to us. The cat was communicating with them. I don't have that ability, but she said that they wanted us to leave. They wanted us to go away. I said, "Are they threatening us?" And she said, "No, they're concerned for our safety."
Huh.
So you can only stay on the battlefield until 10 o'clock at night during this time period. Later, it closes earlier. So we left and went to Little Round Top proper. Again, we stopped where some of my ancestors fought,
Mhm.
and we saw a dark figure pacing back and forth with a gun. He's been reported in that area before. He's termed the sentry. He's believed to be a Union soldier. But then we started seeing lighter colored figures appearing, and they started walking toward us.
Mhm.
And eventually there were about 2 dozen of them. None of these figures had guns, but I believe they were all Confederate soldiers. Well, they, again, with the uniform, I do living history, so I'm familiar with the cuts of the uniform. They were semi-transparent, clearly human figures. I could not make out like facial features or like individual fingers, but the cut of the uniform, the hats, and they're gathering around reacting to us. One of them, Kat said his name was Sam, said he was connected to me. I could find no Sams among my ancestors in the Alabama Brigade, but I could see him.
Mhm.
Um, he was short, looked to be a little bit heavy set.
Right.
One of the soldiers was almost within arm's reach of me, and he was very tall. I look, and he was right there, and I was startled, and I jumped back, and I know Kat saw the same thing because she said, "Boy, he's a tall gomer, isn't he?" I'm glad I had somebody with me because I would have questioned my sanity had I been alone. And it got very cold. Like Kat said, I started shivering, but I was so fascinated. I was not frightened. I did not want to leave. She became uneasy as they gathered around and got closer and closer, and she wanted to leave. So we did leave. But that to me was just an incredible experience.
Sounds like it. Do you think that as the night gets later that more of them come out, or do you think it's because she was psychic to begin with, and then you obviously are you attract them as well? So you think it was a combination of that, or maybe the later it gets at night because it gets so quiet out there, the more the activity increases.
I think the fact that we were there alone and it was at night, I don't know that it being night necessarily enters into it, but I do believe you can see them better at night. And also because we were there alone, I do believe that Kat's abilities played into it. I have had other things happen in that area. I didn't know for the longest time that I had ancestors there. I had not researched that branch
Hmm.
of my family. But when things kept happening there, I thought, what's going on here? So I started looking into it. And my great grandfather, Frank Champion, was captured at Little Round Top. I had a great uncle in the adjoining company. These were the 15th Alabama um, infantry. They were in the 15th Alabama that attacked Colonel Chamberlain's 20th Maine at Little Round Top. Very famous action. The movie Gettysburg focuses on
Hmm.
that action. But yeah, I think it was a combination of maybe the weather. It was kind of a damp, still evening. Maybe that atmosphere played into it, but I've never had anything quite like that happen since or before.
Yeah, it could have been a combination of things. Now, the ones you saw, the apparitions you saw, were they aware of you there? Do you think?
They obviously they were gathering around us, like
Okay.
looking at us. Yeah, they were reacting to us. One thing I regret, I did not. We were not there to investigate. You're not allowed to have the equipment on the field. I did not have a camera with me. We were in Kat's car, and my camera was back in my car.
Hmm.
And I didn't even think to try to get images with the phone. I was just so into the moment, or try to get recordings on the phone. I could have done that, and I was just overwhelmed almost by the experience.
Well, I've seen photos, in some video, people that somehow get the stuff that like they're driving along, like in this one particular video I saw recently. They're driving along and they're going by some cannons, and they pick up an apparition kind of moving around the back of the cannons. You can't really make out what it is. It looks like a man standing there at one point. But I mean,
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, what you experienced was incredible. I mean, I've never been there. I would love to go there myself, because I can't even begin to imagine. I know we've had Civil War battles out here, but not like there. And the energy must be so high. There's so much trauma that people went through. Cousins were fighting cousins, brothers were fighting brothers. So that energy has to be there. And the question that I wonder if they're still, if they're lingering there because of that energy, or if they're still like in the middle of the battle.
Um, I I think that they are aware that they have passed.
Hmm.
Um, I think one of the theories, and I believe there's some truth to this, is that because so many died and they were comrades, that they're there together. I have a medium friend who has tried to get them to cross over,
Hmm.
and they tell her they don't trust her, they don't believe her, that what she's telling them is true, and they're here together, and they just stay in this realm
Hmm.
by choice. Now
That's
that's it's a theory. I don't know that to be a fact, but I think it's a plausible theory.
Now let's go back to that other place you talked about, because, like you said, the ghost there, that particular ghost knows you. Do
Hmm.
you think that going repeat going to a place back and forth for years, that the ghosts actually do know who you are after a while?
Oh, beyond a shadow of a doubt, this ghost. I became acquainted with him. My first ever investigation in their basement with a ghost box. We're asking, is anyone here? Yes. Were you a soldier? Yes. Were you Union or Confederate? Rebel. So, well, what unit were you in? And he said, 34th Virginia. With that high number, I just assumed it was infantry. So I said, oh, Virginia infantry? He said, no, cavalry. Like he was
Ah.
angry with me, and he wouldn't talk to me the rest of that evening. But we've come to conclude later he's actually a young boy who was a servant with that unit, and the 34th Virginia Battalion of Cavalry was at Gettysburg, was at that location during the battle. And in the dirt of the basement, which was a Confederate field hospital, the owners have found an officer's belt buckle with 34 cast in the brass in the middle of the buckle.
That's awesome. Maybe it's a case too where, like, I remember my father talking about, registering for the war back in World War II, and how there were certain fields you didn't want to go into because on the Navy ships the food was better,
Mm-hmm.
and then you didn't end up slogging, like he says, because he was in the Coast Guard. So you didn't end up slogging, like the dog-faced soldiers. There's the army. Their rations weren't that great. They were, eating crappy food, and then they were slogging through the mud. So maybe that's why his attitude was different. Than, oh yeah, you're in infantry. No, I'm in the cavalry.
Uh-huh. Oh,
If we
yeah,
get
there was some animosity between those two branches.
right.
Yes.
Oh, absolutely. I can completely understand that. Um, So as you got to know that particular ghost, and he got to know you, was he a lot more open with you when you asked questions?
Um, yes and no. They're it's a very active place, and sometimes Jackson gets overwhelmed,
Mm-hmm.
but he will react. We've actually gotten him to move like balls and marbles on command. He, like I say, he'll ask for me when I'm not there. Probably the most remarkable thing that happened with Jackson, I was investigating with another gentleman, actually a law enforcement officer,
Mm-hmm.
um, and we were in the basement. We were the only two there, and we were about probably 15 feet apart. And in between us, as a trigger object, was a reproduction of a wooden toy train from the period, and the cars were just placed haphazardly on the ground between us. Now it was dark. I mean, I could see where he was. I know he did not get out of his chair. I did not get out of mine. We asked Jackson to play with the train. When we turned the light back on later, the cars were placed neatly parallel to each
Wow,
other. Wish I could have seen those move.
that is cool. That is really cool. Super
But
cool.
Jackson will. Oh, he's even kind of insulted me. I hadn't been there for a while, so I was in the office or in the basement. Says, "Hey, Jackson, yeah." So I'm here. You glad to see me? He says, "Oh yeah, bless your heart," which is a southern insult of sorts, polite
Mm-hmm.
insult.
So you're not afraid, like when you go to that place. I mean, because it was a hospital. Obviously, there's a ton of energy in there. I mean, there's always stories of these barns because they had so many bodies that they just piled bodies up in the barns and stuff in these different places. I mean, you haven't made anything negative there or anything? It's just these poor souls that had these injuries.
Yeah, that's basically it. Now there is a former owner of the place, and he's actually the nasty one. He swears. I can't even begin to repeat a lot of what he will say through the ghost box. And I guess the family that owned the farm during the Civil War, their descendants is who our friends bought it from. And this gentleman by the name of Sanders, I guess, was so mean that he would kick his children out when they turned like 16, just would kick them out of the house. Very
Nice.
nasty. But as far as the military presence, no, I've never really felt threatened there at all. Park
Interesting.
Service told them they have at least 12 Confederates buried on the property.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I'd like to live someplace where somebody's buried on the property. It's just me, but I mean, even being a ghost hunter for as long as I have, I don't know. So some people would love it, but me, I'm just not into that thing. It's bad enough I got what's going on here anyway. I have enough action, like your house. There's enough action here to keep me occupied for a long time. And I don't do any EVP work or anything here either. I don't. I know they're here. I just don't want to hear them. I'm fine with it. It's
Yeah,
just one of those things.
that's how I am. We don't investigate here, but
Do you find yourself sometimes because the energy in your house that you're exhausted sometimes?
um, I I have kind of learned to turn it off
Mm-hmm.
to just kind of get out of that. But yeah, there are times, and often before I've kind of learned to key into the energy. And like
Mm-hmm.
before something happens, I'll often sense the shift in the energy.
Mm-hmm.
Most recent interesting thing that happened to me, this was several months ago. I fell asleep in the recliner in my living room, and I woke up to have a young woman bending over me, looking at me. She was in very outmoded dress. She had on a white apron, kind of frizzy brown hair, clear as could be. And I know I wasn't dreaming
Mm-hmm.
because I awoke and I see this, and I sat up immediately. And she backed off and smiled at me. By this time, I'm totally wide awake. She just looked at me, smiled, turned around, and walked away and kind of walked through the TV stand and then
Wow.
just disappeared. And
Yeah.
I wasn't frightened. I was startled. And it was 2:19 in the morning. I looked at my phone and remember that.
Do you think it's because, the more you're in contact with them, the more they're coming to you now because you're more open to it?
I believe so. And my wife is very open and she has experiences and things will just happen out of the blue. The odd thing is like things will come up missing that we know we put, such and such place, and they'll show up somewhere where we would never have put them.
Mm-hmm.
One time before we moved in, I had a workbench set up in the living room. All my straight slotted screwdrivers came up missing one day. I opened the drawer. Phillips were still there, but the straight slotted ones were all gone. Over the next month or so, I found them all in odd places, just stashed places.
See, it's too bad you can't get them to use them and fix stuff around the house. Wouldn't that help? Huh?
Hey, that would be handy. Actually, one of the owners of the house was a carpenter, built houses and so forth. So
put them to work for you. Get them to help you out a little bit. Do you think, like I said, do you think that you've had the ability to be in contact with ghosts a long time ago, or do you think it's just something that happened later on? We're all like I said earlier, before we started the interview, where it had to take things lined up in a row to bring that out in you.
Yeah, I think I just kind of pushed that away and rationalized it away until I had the overwhelming experiences here. And now I've kind of learned to tune into it, and I recognize things that happened to me before that as being paranormal, and I did not recognize it or would not recognize it.
Sure. And you're very respectful to them, so they're respectful back for the most part.
Yeah, for the most part. Like I say, once my wife had actually a pewter beer stein that belonged to her dad. She has on a dresser in her bedroom. That went flying off one morning and took out a picture of her mom and dad, and broke the frame, broke the glass in the frame. And it's the same kind of thing. She said, "Don't do that again." And that's the only experience like that she's had. But for the most part, it's very benign, usually sounds or smells.
Okay, cool. Now we'll jump back over the battlefields. Do you feel an energy? I mean, when you step out of the field, when you first arrive, do you feel any kind of energy when you're out there?
Yeah, sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't. Like once driving through across the area of Pickett's Charge when I first arrived in one of my trips, it was a very, very intense energy. At different battlefields, I have actually had experiences where I see in my mind's eye what happened there. The first time it happened, I chalked it off to being tired because we had driven most of the night to get there. And I knew what happened, and I kind of chalked it up to an active imagination. But this was before my paranormal experiences with the house. Now, when that happens, I recognize it. I had a very intense experience on East Cemetery Hill at Gettysburg. My friend who was with me thought I'd had a stroke because I was standing there. I couldn't talk. And in my mind's eye, I'm seeing darkness, muzzle flashes, sensing confusion. I didn't know what happened there at that time. When I got home and researched it, I found out that's where the Louisiana Tigers, Confederates, overran some of the Federals, pushed them back among the cannon, and then the Confederate or the Union got reinforcements, pushed them back. What I saw in my mind's eye is exactly what happened there.
And was that battle during the day or at night?
It was at night.
Okay.
It was just after dark on the second day of the battle.
Wow. See, you are getting more psychic as you go on.
It kind of, people who are psychic tell me you can sharpen those abilities, and I do believe that I'm very limited in my abilities
Sure.
compared to some people, almost non-existent, but I do at times have some things happen.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that, and maybe your mind too. I always believe too that the abilities that we have are given to us from somewhere, and I think that they'll limit, depending on how your mindset is or how they feel about you. Whoever it is what I'm saying. Whoever's controlling all this, they they give you as much as you can handle.
I think there's a lot of truth there, and I have done a lot of research, and I believe that our energies do survive our death. I think the evidence is overwhelming in that account.
Now, do you think, because like when you talk about things like Gettysburg or even your own house, I mean, do you think that it has to be a traumatic experience that happened to somebody when they passed for that energy to survive, or do you think like with the little girl, even though she had cancer, your house was probably a happy place to be, and that's why she likes to hang out there? So, do you think it's a handful of both, or you think it's more so when a trauma occurs?
I think it can be, it doesn't have to be. I think the shared trauma of the battlefields plays a role there. I think the spirits kind of hang out together,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that is a big part of that because there's so much death in one place. But no, I think a lot of times, like he's like with the little girl, yeah, it was her happy place.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that's why she's here. I think that is kind of the case with Henry and Margaret Miller, the former owners. I mean, they died. I don't think a traumatic death. I believe it was an illness, but
Mm-hmm.
they still seem to be here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And there's probably, like I said, a lot of energy because it was used for the Underground Railroad too. So you got that energy of having to hide people and the people that were hidden.
Mhm.
So tell me what's next for you.
Well, I am working on a couple of books. I had talked about my experience on East Cemetery Hill at Gettysburg.
Mm-hmm.
I looked into that, and that actually was the spot that the 107th Ohio fought, and that was a German unit. And I believe that happened to me because they want their story told. They were treated very badly.
Okay.
They had very bad luck at Chancellorsville in May of 1863. Their brigade was the right flank of the army, and half the Confederate army came crashing down, swept them away. They were accused of being cowardly. Their corps badge was the crescent moon. They were called the running half moons. At Gettysburg, then in July 1863, the same thing happened. Their brigade is the right flank of the Union Army. Half the Confederate Army crashed through,
Mm-hmm.
sent them running. Their colonel, who was wounded at Chancellorsville, came back and actually was trying to rally soldiers in downtown Gettysburg while the Confederates are crashing through, but he was separated from part of his unit. So he was charged with cowardice and arrested. He was acquitted at his court martial because he was anything but a coward. But so I'm writing a book on the 107th Ohio at Chancellorsville and Gettysburg and how the Germans were treated poorly.
Fantastic. I can't wait to read it. It's going to be a good book.
And I'm working on also a project, just really the best available evidence into the afterlife,
All right.
continuation of our consciousness after death. A lot of interesting evidence.
Absolutely. How can people find you?
You can find me online. My wife and I have a small publishing house, Faded Banner Publications. You can find me at fadedbanner.com or imetaghost.com for the
Okay.
paranormal books.
Okay, fair enough. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really enjoyed it. I was looking forward to this, and it's fun to hear the view of a journalist. when you look at this stuff like you did, because that's what I had to do, was hunker down and do the research and find out what the heck could be going on. Because we're just not going to say, hey, I have a ghost, woo-hoo-hoo. We're going to look into all this stuff. So that's what we do. So it was really fun to talk with you, and I really appreciate you coming on.
Well, I appreciate you reaching out. Yeah, when I got your email asking me to come on, I said, "Oh, fellow journalist, you bet. I'd love the chance to be on this show."
I would love to have you on again when you get your next book done too.
That sounds good. I would love to do that. I've enjoyed the experience.
All right, sir. Well, you have a good evening. I know it's late for you in Ohio. And say hi to the fireflies for me, because I just love those fireflies. My father was born and grew up in Ohio, so I've been back several times, with him over the years. And I remember going out on the summer nights and seeing those fireflies. Loved it.
Yeah, a little early for them, but they'll be here soon enough.
Fair enough. Thank you, and you have a good evening, okay?
You too. Thanks for having me on.
Have a good night. Bye-bye. Okay, that was really fun. I mean, that was fantastic. I would love to get to Gettysburg someday and see what he's seen. You don't get to see that every day. Anyway, tomorrow's guest is going to be Matthew Alper, and we're kind of shifting gears because Matthew Alper believes that it's all in your head, that our beliefs, our religious beliefs, they don't come genetically or anything like that. He believes that it's in the brain. That we're somehow pre-programmed, predisposition to believe in religions and stuff. So he's going to explain his theory tomorrow, and so he'll be here at 6:30 p.m. Pacific. I want to thank our guest once again, Don Allison. My gosh, that was great. It was fun talking to a fellow journalist about this stuff. I really, really enjoyed it again. Let's see. If you like the show, share it with 5 people. If you hated the show, share it with 5 of your enemies. We're equal opportunity here at California Haunts Radio. And I want to thank you guys for joining. Again, so please subscribe to our YouTube page. We're also on TikTok, so you want to check us out. Check out California Haunts. We're over there on TikTok. I'm posting short videos for each one of these interviews I do, so you can check that out. Plus, I'm going to be doing other things on TikTok as well. You want to visit the radio site? That's CaliforniaHauntsRadio.com, or our paranormal site is CaliforniaHaunts.org. Now, on the radio site, because sometimes it's hard to find our YouTube site, that's the easiest way to find us. You go to the radio site, click on the video there, it'll take you over to the YouTube site. Also, I've got all our archives going back for the last 2 years, and you can check that out, as well as some of our Blog Talk archives, because we've not only been on the air here, we've been on the air for like 8-9 years over at Blog Talk Radio. So you can check all that out. The other thing I want to announce is put June 23rd on your calendar, because June 23rd is going to be the 200th show of this version of California Haunts Radio. So we're going to have a little party here. We're going to have giveaways. I have some ghostly books you guys will be interested in, and we're going to do giveaways and special guests and all that good stuff. So put that on your calendar. Anyway, it's been great being with everybody, and I want to thank Don again one more time. And I'm going to go ahead and show you guys his books and where you can get them. And I really appreciate all of you coming tonight, because I know it's the end of a holiday weekend. You're just getting home, or just digesting after your barbecues. I know what it's like this weekend. First weekend of summer. I know I did a lot of yard work this weekend, but yeah, thank you guys for coming, and I will see you tomorrow. So here we go. So his website is imetaghost.com. So let's remember that. I hope I got that right, but yeah. And then the book is I Met a Ghost at Gettysburg. And the second book is I Met More Ghosts at Gettysburg. And of course, you can get them at Amazon.com. Anyway, again, thank you, Don, for coming on. I so appreciate it. And I will see all you guys tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Pacific.